Welcome back to Spitballin Cards. In today's episode, we have a couple fun topics. The first one is Ty was not here this past week, and we discussed a video. We called it Breakers Are Milking the Hobby Dry. And what it was about how we believe that breakers are not really a great thing because, they make wax more expensive, breaking's addictive. And Ty messaged us in our group chat after watching that and said, I'm going to drop a truth bomb on you in perspective. And so I'm excited to hear what Ty has to say about it on the opposite end of that spectrum. So without further ado, Ty, what were your thoughts from our video this past week and what do you disagree with?
I feel like this should be the format you did on the other video where you each picked a side of the debate and then kind of went from there, which I also enjoyed. But you guys brought up some good points. It's a really important topic, and addiction's an important topic. And so are some of the other things that you talked about. And the biggest thing, I've got a list of points. I try not to have too many extended monologues, but I do have a list of points I want to get through and just share a little bit of maybe different, broader perspective on this. The main thing, I guess, that I want to get across is there's a lot of different ways that people can lose money in the sports card hobby. In fact, most of the hobby is kind of a financial, a losing proposition at the end of the day, if you're actively participating in the modern hobby. So it's a really important overarching principle and one that I don't think is getting talked about necessarily enough. So I've got a list of points. I'm going to talk through these. The first thing is that I really disagreed with. I don't remember who among the four of you guys last week agreed or said that there's a big difference between breaking and ripping boxes yourself. I know the topic of you can just get nothing as opposed to getting cards out of a box. But Chris, I think I remember you messaging me about a Stadium Club Chrome box that you ripped and you weren't happy having any of the cards in the box. So you had a box full of stuff, but you were pissed off that you owned the cards that came out of the box. And the same thing happened to me recently. I opened a box. I brought a box of Series 2 tops up to rip with a friend and his son. And we opened it. It was a $110 box plus taxes. And I got $5 worth of cards out of it. And I didn't want any of them. And then there's the dilemma of what do you want with these cards? So I see both of them as gambling. I acknowledge that. I think ripping boxes is gambling. It's the big G word that nobody wants to say. And both are usually poor financial investments. When I hear that Rob from Burbank, who I very much like and respect, and I agree with him on a lot of things, and I love how many singles and value cards and things he has. But when I hear him disparage breaking as fractionalized gambling, but then turn around and proudly promote full boxes of sealed wax as part of Burbank's new offering with dynamically changing price tags like he did on Instagram today, that to me smacks of being a double standard. I don't see how you can say, oh, you can do full-blown gambling for $300, $400, $500, $2,000 a box, but getting in for a fractionalized price because you want to chase the teams that you like the Tigers, that's crossing the line. That's not a good idea. The bigger picture, and this is something that Chris Sewell called out recently in one of the videos, is that right now is arguably the worst return on investment for opening sealed product ever in the history of sealed product, of opening. It's just bad in general. You're not going to get your value out of it. And so that's a big overarching problem. Specific to the addiction piece, it's not unique to breaking. People get addicted to ripping and opening boxes themselves. They also get addicted to a whole lot of other things like scrolling eBay, scrolling TikTok and Instagram, social media, alcohol. You guys talked about some of those things. Addiction is like a human problem. It's just a human dynamic problem. It's not unique to the hobby, and it's certainly not unique to ripping boxes or to breaking. So what I see a lot of times is people in the hobby, and maybe this is just a broader human dynamic too, latch onto things that have sort of a gross element to them. And then whether intentional or not, they like to virtue signal about it and talk about it, have sort of this collective rally behind this thing being a terrible thing, but it's not really fair. There's a lot of people who do break responsibly, and there are a lot of breakers who do it at cost or slightly above cost because they like building the community. Doug from my team did that for years. He hasn't been doing it recently, but he would run little breaks and he'd run them through Discord. He'd get the interest and he would honestly make nowhere near what was worth his time just because he liked opening boxes and he liked participating in the chat with everybody. And those people really appreciated the experience too. So it's kind of like everybody looks at the piece that are the negatives of breaking and goes, oh, I don't really like any of this. So the whole thing must be a net negative. We're really bad for the hobby. And I think that's short-sighted and it's not being reasonable to the bigger picture of it. There's also just like a personal responsibility problem. Scott, I think you were the one who maybe pointed out, I don't remember who, people spend $10 here and $10 there, and suddenly your bank statement is at $1,000 at the end of the month. That's not breaking's fault. That's a personal financial management problem.
I agree. I even said like you can do the same thing with singles on eBay.
You can. Yeah. And that's like the bigger picture. And that's kind of leading. This is like sort of the ultimate punchline that I really want, all of your feedback on. But there's that aspect, about everybody says buy singles, just buy the singles that you want, and then you won't be unhappy. But like the truth is, if you're buying ultra modern singles, you're probably still going to lose your shirt just as badly as if you're buying boxes. It's just a different type of loss because you're going on to eBay and you're paying the money at like present market value. If it's anybody who's active right now, and then their prices just go down over time. This is a very, very provable, demonstrable dynamic for 99% of cards today. And it doesn't even matter if the players are good. I've got a video coming out next week on the Market Movers channel talking about players who I believe like the ship has sailed on. And I'm going to talk about ones who it's completely gone on, whose cards I would just be selling unless you want to collect them. And then others who probably are close, but maybe could have a rebound in the event of certain cases. But we've seen this like with so many players who have been very good and on the trajectory of the Hall of Very Good to the Hall of Great. And their prices just down. Usually within like their third to fourth year in the league, they just start to tank because there's a new shiny object coming onto the scene that everybody wants to chase. Like I said, there is also some upside for breaking. You get to buy in if you only want your favorite team or your favorite player out of a given box, and that's what you want to chase. Well, now, sure, fractionalize gambling, but also fractionalize collecting. I can buy into a case break for Riley Green and pay less than what I would pay for a box, one hobby box in that case, significantly less in a lot of cases. And then I get all the Riley Green cards. And there's sure to be some that come out of the box. Maybe they won't be the value of what I paid, but if it's $15, it's like, oh, cool. I start to chase my rainbow and start to build that out. At the end of the day, the big winners in the hobby financially are people who play the margin game. That's why flipping is a thing right now. It's why people buy at margin and they instantly flip. It's how a lot of card shops operate. They're not, even Cards HQ doesn't even grade a lot of the raw cards that they buy. They don't even look at them. They just buy and list and buy and list, and they turn for margin. The manufacturers are making a lot of money because they're the ones who control, the printing and the prices, and they can sort of set the price on everything to ensure they're making money. And then like the grading companies and the shops and the distributors, as well as the breakers. The rest of us, like regardless of how you're participating, are probably losing money unless you're really good, and some of you guys have been, about timing the market and buying opportunistically and then selling and being okay with letting cards go. But like the vast majority of what I hear from the people who are the most vocal about disparaging breaking and ripping boxes, who are the ones that are chanting buy singles, they're buying cards that are not going to hold their value long term. And that's fine. It's completely fine. But acknowledge that fact. Acknowledge the fact that you will lose money over time. And if that's your hobby, it's totally fine. But if somebody else wants to thrill seek by buying into breaks, I don't see a problem with that either. So it's more like the big picture. It's like everybody kind of focuses on the little thing, maybe they're not edge cases, but like I said, it's the gross part of it. And they extrapolate it into breaking bad, boxes bad, when in reality, those two things get us the cards to buy on the secondary market as singles. And that's kind of my attitude toward it. I know a lot of people are not going to agree with that. But I just think the whole value proposition of buying cards in general tends to be somewhat of a fool's errand for a lot of people. At the very least, in the singles market, there's always a winner and a loser.
At least in the singles market, one good thing is you know what you're getting when you spend money. That's the one thing I'd argue.
You do.
I know I'm getting an Aaron Judge card.
I agree.
When you buy an Aaron Judge spot, most likely you'll get.
And I want to be really clear about something. I'm almost like arguing from the perspective. So a lot of people, like I said, seem to be arguing from like the perspective of like trying to defend the little man or like the victims who are whatever. We're all grown men and some women, but most of us are men. And so you take accountability. And if you spend $10, $30, $100, $200,000 on breaks in a given year, you got to swallow that pill. Nobody held a gun to your head and said, buy again, buy again, buy again. Is the system set up in such a way to be conducive to that and to encourage you. Yes, just like Instagram is set up like this, just like Coco Melon's designed to melt the brains of children. There's a lot of aspects to it. Be smarter than it. And so I think the educational piece is really important, and the awareness piece. And I don't want anybody being duped. At the end of the day, half of the market movers videos I put out today and talk about it on this channel are oriented around that and around the awareness factor and being smart and educated with what you're doing in this hobby. And that's the most important thing. Just know what you're getting into, take personal responsibility, and then kind of go from there. So anyway, what do you guys think?
Ooh. I don't know if anyone is still with us after Ty said in minute 2 that everyone in this hobby is losing money and no cards will have any value and all of ultra modern is worthless. Yeah, I kind of want to just echo what Scott said. I get exactly what you're saying. It's a risk either way. And yeah, most of the single cards that we buy will probably over time lose money. But at least if we're collecting, which I think is the basis of what we're doing, I'd rather just go collect more Acuna and Freeman.
I agree.
Then roll the dice and hope I pull those cards out of a box. If they're all going to go to zero, I'd rather just buy them myself anyway.
I agree. I agree. And that's almost entirely what I do today. I very rarely rip anything because it's such a bad value proposition. But what I don't do is like ridicule. We don't hear from the people who don't care if they're losing money ripping boxes. We hear from the people that post on Reddit or their wives do that they made a big mistake. But if the whole thing were like ruining every single person's life, we would hear about it a lot more and it would change. But the reality is I meet a lot of people who are like, I got a lot of money and I just love buying into breaks and like, okay.
And that exists. It's the same concept as those that, alcoholism, right? Some people have an issue with it. People don't have an issue with it. I agree with you when you brought that up. So
it is fun to rip boxes. I think just I have to say it is fun to rip a box. I've been doing it since I was a kid. I remember buying like 87 Topps hockey packs at 7-Eleven for 45 or 50 cents and just hoping to pull a Wayne Gretzky or any New York Rangers card. And it was fun. And it's still fun today to get a box with your buddies and rip through it. There is like an entertainment value to it. If going to the movies with my wife costs $50 and a Series 2 hobby box is going to set me back $100, I should take my wife to the movies is what I probably should do. Maybe twice.
Agree.
Yeah, just a few things to add there. I think there's a lot of truth to what Ty said. When we're making a video talking about how group raking is a threat to the hobby, sometimes you don't have enough room to throw in all the nuances of, well, in the scheme of things, there is a lot of good to it, and it's not that different than these other things but I don't think we got around to it there, and Ty not being there was probably a reason why we also didn't get around to it. But so Ty talks about the difference of group breaking and breaking wax that you're purchasing yourself. I would say that for the most part, it is a lot of the same. But group breaking does allow you, in my opinion, to be able to do it easier. You're clicking a button. You're maybe not noticing the receipts racking up. You're also not going to a store or physically opening any pack. Somebody else is doing it on your behalf. And then on the other end of that, in the mail, maybe you're only getting the hits. So you're accruing maybe fewer cards. You're not realizing it has become a problem. And of course, you're paying a little bit more per spot because of the margin that goes to the breaker or breaking company or platform, whatever. What I would say with regards to like comparing singles to breaking of any kind is that, in my opinion, somebody who has 5 years of education and experience in this hobby, which might be a minority of us, right, at this point. So let's say 3 years. 3 years of education and experience. I think you're less likely to get yourself in hot water if you're to solely engage in the singles buying aspect of the hobby. Where with breaking, if that's the only way that you're engaging with a hobby and you're doing that consistently, I'd say that's more likely to end up being very destructive behavior, which could be shown in, racking up debt, spouses getting mad, not having enough money to put gas in your car or whatever. But I think there's a few things here we should talk about with regards to just singles buying. And we've never really talked about this in full, but I think singles buying can hit you in many different ways. So somebody like me who buys a lot of players, I speculate on prospects, younger players, try to flip them within like 6 months or 18 months. I think that's kind of similar to the dopamine hit you would get from sports betting with a futures bet, right? Like plus 1,800, Kyle Tucker for MVP, put some money on it. Let's see if it hits, right? So you're going for that high, you're going kind of for that chase. But then also there are folks, and I think all of us kind of fit this, probably me less than you, the three of you guys here, where sometimes people don't have specific collecting goals and they'll just buy for the sake of buying. So you're not really going for a dopamine hit, but you're looking to fill a void, some sort of happiness issue, or in really the anticipation is getting that thing in the mail, open up the package, you're like, oh, cool. 15 seconds of that feels pretty nice. You put it to the side. You have no target in mind. There's no structure around when you're buying or if you're going to stop your buying. And I feel like it's kind of like hoarding, right? Accumulate for the sake of accumulating versus having a plan in mind. Like, okay, trying to collect this complete set of home field advantages. Then I'm going to move on to some other thing, and staying within your means, being responsible about it, of course. At the end of the day, going back to breaking, anything done in moderation with a decent mindset that it's fine. I don't think it's overly destructive. Alcohol, sports betting. I mean, we're not trying to get rid of it. Like I'm not trying to shout from a roof deck, like, let's get rid of breaking entirely. But I think people just need to be warned and understand the risks.
Yeah. One thing I'll also know about buying singles is spending $200 on a single versus $200 on a break spot. You can always sell the single for $170 instantly, right? You can always get a majority of your money back, where that's not always the case with breaking, which is hard. But I do agree. And I will say, though, like there is an adrenaline rush and a high of buying singles. And so for me, I don't know if I'm the only one, but there's times like looking forward to getting the card is just as much fun, if not more fun, than owning the card. As well as hunting for the card, looking for 6 months for a card, then you own it. And then 6 months later, maybe you're bored of it, right? So it happens that way for everybody. I guess collect responsibly, right? Maybe that's the biggest thing, regardless of how you do it. And don't overspend what you can afford to spend is the big thing, regardless of what you're buying. So,
yeah, I do want to give one shout out really quickly to these guys. I shouted them out a recent video, but Collectors MD, it's a recently formed group. They have an Instagram and obviously this website, but it's a support group. And if you do have an addiction problem, even, you're just a little concerned, it seems like a really good support group. So I know they've already made an impact for some people. So, and I don't want to give the impression again that addiction's not real or anything along those lines. It is. I think probably all of us know people who've had, or maybe ourselves have had issues with that in life. So if that's something you're struggling with and you are having a hard time walking away and not chasing the next hit in a box or even with singles, I'm sure they could be of some support.
You know what's the hardest thing for me? Wanting to always get the next card. I just bought a really cool card. You guys don't know what it is yet. I think Ty might know what it is. I think I told Ty. But it's coming in this week. But it's like, man, I also really want a Charizard first edition. And then it's like, okay, well, that's another $10,000. So it's okay. How do I get that card? So I think practicing contentment is a big thing too. And that's something I need to work on myself. So we all have things that we need to be aware of and don't feed the beast a little bit. But thanks for shouting that out, Ty.
Yep.
I just wanted to add one other thing. First of all, real quick, Scott, I've given you a specific example where I could not get most of my money back on a single I bought. I had a $300 Wander Franco in the mail headed towards my house. By the time I opened up that package, it was worth about $25. Obviously, that's a pretty unusual situation.
That's a risk. Yeah.
Hopefully. There is another, this is a Phil mentioned little dopamine burst. I get one in this hobby doing blind PSA reveals with Jeff on our Blabbing About Slabbing channel. And when you get that gem card of a raw you bought, I definitely do get like a nice little endorphin rush. And I've stopped myself. I used to do this for a while when we started doing those. I would literally look for cards that I don't necessarily want, but nice value cards around $100 that I thought I could gem because I'm like, oh, this would be a good addition to a show about a blind reveal. And I started chasing the raw to PSA 10 to get that sort of that rush. And then I would try to sell most of the cards. And some of them, they come back in 8, you get that random grader who screws you, and money can disappear that way very, very quickly. I have been able to rein that in, but there was a 3 or 4 month time where I was like, what am I doing? I am literally chasing this gem rush.
Yeah.
Grading kind of feels like opening packs in a way. It's the same feeling, but way higher odds of getting something good. So I agree.
Yeah. if you look at the grading numbers published by Gemrate, you'd easily deduce right away that not all of this is logical and rational. A lot of this is irrational. The amount of people and cards that are kind of getting involved, clogging up all these prop reports and the turnaround times and everything. You have to just assume some amount of that is some sort of like addictive driven, like I'm just really obsessed with what Chris is talking about there. So I think that makes a lot of sense. One other thing I'll mention is that I made a comment towards the end of the video that we did, and I said that this isn't all because of breaking, by the way, that people are obsessed with chasing hits. A lot of this just has to do with the nature of serialized cards. And part of that is also culture is much more gambling oriented, right? So this starts from, sports betting, and this is just society now, right? So group breaking is just like one kind of representation of that behavior more than it is like, oh, get rid of group breaking and you fix everything. And the hobby is all like, smiley faces and whatever the metaphor is. And one last thing I'll mention is, to Ty's point, I like the idea of pick your team breaks. And I think that's a healthier way to go about it, to like truly be targeting as a collector, unless you really like the whole set and you don't care what you get. But unfortunately, I think based on the time it takes to actually price out teams, and based on what I've seen, a vast majority of breaks are actually the random teams, random divisions, over 50%, if not closer to 75%. So there's that.
That can be very true. Yep.
Okay. Well, this episode went a little bit different direction than we anticipated, and it went longer. Ty, thanks for bringing some meaningful thoughts to the chat. And if you're struggling with this, just know you're not alone. You're just addicted to watching Spitballin cards. I don't blame you one bit. But
yeah. If you are, you might as well subscribe, and consider joining our Patreon.
No, we can't say the Patreon. That's the opposite of what we're trying to do here.
I said it.
Go to the Patreon.
Don't buy the next break. Buy Patreon.
And one last thing, lotterization of the hobby, which Fanatics is at least partially responsible for, feeding into the hit chasing and everything with what they've done with on-demand products. And you have a 1 in X amount of chance to get this, and you see how print runs are affected by that with Tops Now and everything. Yeah, I guess we're all to blame here. And any of you guys in the comments also, if you guys have any questions, I mean, I think the four of us here do have addictive tendencies. I myself, I just recently got my screen time down under 5 hours a day. We're sitting at 8. So none of us here are infallible here. And interested to understand if you guys can relate to this content anyway. So
yeah, good thoughts. I have Instagram up on my phone way too often, and I always have the excuse, well, I need it because I sell cards and I buy cards on Instagram. I need to be up to date on all the events for sports cards on Instagram. But sometimes I wonder if I just deleted it, if my life would be any worse. I don't think it would be. So we all have our own things that we're not willing to fully give up. So,
oh yeah,
it's true. Any final thoughts, Ty or Chris?
Nope.
Well, the lotterization, which is a fantastic word. I don't know if Phil just made that up or if
I think Neo made it up like a year ago, unless it's actually a real word.
Well, either way, I love it. That's an excellent word. I'm going to give you credit for it because I like you more.
Word of the day.
Yeah, the whole, like you were talking about their made to order stuff there. The Tops Now, like that stuff is crazy. I mean, I found myself buying the Freddie Freeman, Kirk Gibson, the home run card last October because there were 10 autos in there. So I had a 1 in 80,000 chance of pulling one of those. And that is, I felt like an idiot afterwards, but my dad loved one of those cards. So at least, there's that. But yeah, it's hard. Really tempting.
The Kershaw is just released in Tops Now for his Dynasty Black Logo Man autograph with the Logo Man from his pants from his 3,000th strikeout, which is pretty awesome. That Ty always mentions this, but that's probably going to be the most expensive Clayton Kershaw sale we'll probably ever see. That alongside his Bowman Chrome Superfractor, maybe his red. But the point is, that is more true of gambling because you're buying 80 copies of the same card with just the hope of that one hit. So they are definitely leaning into it. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So just be aware.
The demand's there. Repackers. Now we have digital repacks. I mean, these wouldn't exist if there wasn't demand for it.
Yeah.
There wasn't a genius businessman or inventor that just created this whole idea and just like sucked everybody in. No, like it started really small, the grassroots, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Now 80% of the buying done at shows might be from repackers or people selling to repackers. It's impossible to get away from. So yeah, I mean, this is the hobby now.
Will it always be this way, or do we think it's going to slow down? If that ever slows down, is the hobby just over as we know it? Like, is there? I don't know if we like talked about that the last episode, but like, is there a world where this goes away, or does that mean we're in another late '90s where it's kind of died out?
It's
I don't
always
know
gonna
why
be
or how it would go away.
no.
What do you think, Ty? No,
It's always going to be this way. I think it's been this way for a long time. It's just new dynamics, a lot of new dynamics, new tech, and new marketing insights and tricks have amplified it. Those Tops Now cards, by the way, another reason I think they sell a lot is because the gem rate on them is insanely high, which may or may not be designed, but it's like literally like 90%.
Which makes sense. It's printed, put into a little acrylic box, and sent to you. Like it never has the chance to get dinged up. Didn't it just happen that CGC graded like 100,000 of those or something crazy about Tony's 50/50?
Yeah.
So, anywho,
all right. There's a lot of card show dealers. So at the last episode, I made a comment about how disruptive that repackers are. And there are a lot of show dealers that are pissed off about repackers because they're not able to buy that much from at these shows, which used to be the main reason why they'd set up at these shows. And it's because they're not paying 90%, and some of the repackers or people that sell the repackers are paying close to 90%, right? So my sort of retort to that is like, well, you're selling to them though, so you're benefiting there, right? Even though you can't buy, you're still using these repackers to sell to. Some people are a little fed up right now. I'm not one of those people, but it's a weird dynamic. And if you got rid of repackers, it would make a lot of people happy and it would change things up quite a bit. I don't know.
I guess one way it could be impacted is if the government gets involved and stops repackers. That's one thing that could change the dynamic, but I don't think that's happening for a while. So,
and we benefit from higher singles prices with repackers, so we can't complain too much over here, the four of us.
No, not at all. But other than that, thank you for watching, everybody. We appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next video.